Welcome to the Growth Through Adversity podcast, where men are forged, not coddled. Here we dive deep into the path of true transformation in pursuit of physical, mental, spiritual, and temporal growth. We talk training, nutrition, business, mindset, and spirituality. We embrace strength and we loathe ease. We reject weakness in every form and cultivate power, the will to power itself. This is the rebirth of modern man. Raw masculinity, tempered by reason, virtue, and right action, because nothing of value is earned without sacrifice. Let's begin our apotheosis together. What is up, everybody? Today we are going to be talking about exogenous testosterone. And I'll start with, what is exogenous testosterone? So exogenous testosterone is testosterone introduced into the body from an external source, typically via injection, testosterone cypionate or enanthate, topical gels, or even pellets that release over time. It mimics the endogenous or natural testosterone that your body produces in your testes. So this is a follow-up from the last discussion we had about testosterone and boosting testosterone and all of that in my live. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch it or listen to it because it's going to lay out a lot of the framework and the groundwork for this discussion today. So let's talk a little bit more, and I know we covered it a little bit last time, but let's go a little bit more into depth here on the body's natural regulation and production of testosterone, because if we're going to consider messing with our body's natural production, we have to understand the systems involved. So the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, or the HPGA, is the axis between your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your gonads, your testicles, which regulates, it's a negative feedback loop, and it regulates testosterone production. So when the body detects that your testosterone levels are too low, this signals the release of luteinizing hormone that goes down to your testicles and communicates with your testicles and tells them to produce more testosterone and also more sperm. And then when the levels get too high, you have a reverse of that feedback loop where it downregulates your testosterone so that you theoretically keep yourself balanced. Now, before explaining what exogenous testosterone does, you need to understand completely how this natural testosterone is regulated. And again, you have the hypothalamus releases GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone. GnRH stimulates the pituitary gland to release LH, or luteinizing hormone, as we were just talking about, and FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone. LH stimulates the Leydig cells in the testes to produce testosterone. FSH supports sperm production. So these two are what lead to male fertility, and it's virtually the same system in women. So testosterone then feeds back in a negative feedback loop to suppress GnRH, LH, and FSH. What happens? So what happens if you subvert that system and you just directly inject testosterone into your body? Well, number one, and probably the biggest downside to that, although there are some other risks, is that it disrupts your HPGA, or your hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis that we were just talking about. So exogenous testosterone increases serum testosterone levels rapidly. So the blood serum testosterone levels floating around your body go up rapidly. And depending on the ester, whether it's cypionate, enanthate, propionate, or like suspension, which is just testosterone crystals in water, is going to determine the speed with which that gets into your system. But either way, it's going to be very fast, and it's going to be a very drastic jump in testosterone. So your body is going to recognize that, and it's going to sense the elevated testosterone, and it's going to shut down production of GnRH, LH, and FSH. Without LH and FSH, the testes reduce or stop testosterone and sperm production. This can lead to testicular atrophy and infertility. So that's one of the main side effects of going on TRT. So, and again, that was what our last discussion was about. So if you've got low testosterone levels, it's obviously going to be inhibiting your training, your recovery, probably your libido, your drive, everything that's associated with testosterone, which is all the masculine attributes. And it's even things deeper than that. It's risk aversion. It's all kinds of really good stuff comes in men from testosterone. So if you've got low testosterone levels, like let's say 100, 200, even 300 is pretty low in my nanograms to deciliters is pretty low, in my opinion, for somebody who's going to the gym and training regularly. You try to boost it naturally. You can't. You're hypogonadal. And so you need to go on to TRT. Well, this is what you need to know about, because these TRT clinics that are all over the place, they might tell you a little bit about this depending on how ethical some of them are, but a lot of them, like, they're snake oil salesmen. They just want your money. They don't give a shit. So they're not really going to tell you the fact that you're going to shut down your natural production, that you're not going to have natural testosterone, that you're going to rely on TRT virtually from there moving forward, and that it's going to tank your fertility. Now, if you're not really worried about fertility and you're not really worried about being on TRT long term, then neither of those two things matter. But if you are, then deeper consideration is going to have to go into this process. So it then raises free testosterone, free and total testosterone. So exogenous testosterone raises both total testosterone, which is the testosterone, all your testosterone, even that stuff that's bound up in SBGH and abulum, and your free testosterone, which is bioavailable and exerts effects on tissues immediately. And the effects that it exerts on your target tissues are as follows. Testosterone acts by binding to the androgen receptors in various tissues. So in skeletal muscle, for example, it's going to increase protein synthesis via the mTOR pathway, which we've talked about in other podcasts. It's going to boost satellite cell proliferation and activation and muscle fiber hypertrophy. So this is also going to enhance your neuromuscular efficiency and recovery. So, and that's something that people overlook. Like, I remember there was the whole Mark McGuire scandal back in the 90s when they found out Mark McGuire was juicing, and well, they said, it didn't change how he swung the bat, it just made him stronger. And that's, I understand the sentiment, but it's also not necessarily true, because of what you just heard right there. It enhances neuromuscular efficiency and recovery. It changes your muscle cells at a cellular level. They've done research where they've biopsied muscle cells in people that have been on testosterone long term, and they have more mitochondria. They have more density in the cell body. So it makes fundamental cellular changes. So it actually did change how he swung the bat, to be quite literal in that sense. And then in bone, it's going to promote bone mineral density. This is one of the great side effects of testosterone, of having higher testosterone levels or going on TRT, is that you're going to get denser bones through the conversion of estradiol via aromatase. So that's a natural process that also regulates your testosterone levels. When your testosterone levels get too high, there's this enzyme called the aromatase enzyme that will convert testosterone into estrogen. And so into estradiol E2 specifically. And now high E2 levels in men can cause ED. They can cause they can cause horrible water retention. They can cause all kinds of problems. But the good thing is about estrogen is it's neuroprotective, and it plays heavily on bone density. In fact, postmenopausal women, it's their crash in estrogen that ultimately, or specifically E2, that ultimately leads to osteoporosis and the wasting of their bones. So this will reduce your risk of osteoporosis and having brittle bones. So the effect on fat tissue. Testosterone reduces visceral fat through enhanced lipolysis and an increased metabolic rate. So lipolysis is the process of liberating energy from stored fat. And so testosterone enhances lipolysis, makes lipolysis more efficient and your body more inclined to enter the process of lipolysis. And it also increases your metabolic rate, your resting metabolic rate. So you just burn more calories naturally. So in the brain, what does testosterone do in the brain? It increases dopamine and serotonin and GABA activity. It enhances your libido, which is tied heavily to your dopaminergic and serotonin circuits. In fact, SSRIs often lead to male ED because they play with your serotonin receptors. It enhances your libido, motivation, and your mood. So And it's also a very specific type of motivation. I would say that testosterone can be heavily associated with drive. They associate it with like the masculine element of drive, but it definitely plays heavily into your motivation and your drive and your willingness to take risks to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Now, the whole like roid rage, especially on TRT levels, testosterone is just, it's not a real fucking thing. But depending on, now, it's going to usually, in most people that I've seen, most clients that I've worked with that end up on TRT, it just enhances their it just enhances their natural personality. So if you're an irritable and aggressive asshole to start with, you're going to be more irritable and aggressive if you're on TRT. If you're like an easygoing, calm, relaxed dude, you're going to be more easygoing, calm, and relaxed on TRT. It's going to enhance whatever your natural personality and disposition is. Now, if it's poorly managed, it can definitely lead to some irritability, some aggression. You are playing with your hormones anytime. So if the female hormones get out of range, or you're not doing this, or you're abusing it, or you're not using the proper mitigating side effect mitigating measures, then yes, it can cause some mood issues for sure. Also, some people are more um are more inclined to have mood issues from it than other people. Some people, it doesn't really affect their mood. Some people are very sensitive to mood changes based on their hormones. So that varies from person to person. What else does it do? It stimulates red blood cell production via erythropoietin. That's a tough word to pronounce. Which increases your hematocrit and hemoglobin levels. So now that can become a problem, especially with the hematocrit. Your blood can get so thick that you are very subject, to high blood pressure, and you are at a much higher risk for a clot. So those are a couple of biomarkers that you really want to watch in your blood work if you do end up on TRT. Is you do not want to let your hematocrit go over like 52. If it goes over like 52, then you have to give blood and reduce your hematocrit. And also, if it gets too high, they won't take your blood and a blood donor at blood donor locations because it's useless to them. So you have to manage that, and you can't wait until it's like so high that it's dangerous. You've got to kind of get when it gets out of the high normal range, you've got to kind of deal with that. Now, again, this is going to vary on person to person. Some people have a horrible hematocrit response to TRT and have to give blood like multiple times a year. Others never do. So it's just something, and this is something that I'm going to super stress, and I stress to anybody that I talk to and that seeks advice from me. Again, a lot of my clients seek advice from me on this kind of stuff. That's why I'm doing this podcast talking about it. We talked about natural boosting. We talked about some other stuff in the last one we did on testosterone. So this is a follow-up of like, if everything else fails, hypogonadism, you decide that the risks, the rewards outweigh the risks, and it's your business, your body, and you go hop on a TRT prescription. These are some of the things that you need to know about to mitigate the risks to your health. One of the big ones is going to be hematocrit. And so really, just like as a fundamental rule, you're going to want to watch your blood pressure. You're going to want to watch everything about your cardiovascular health. So we're going to want to watch bad cholesterol to good cholesterol ratios. You're going to want to watch blood pressure, and you're really going to want to watch hematocrit, and just kind of get blood work like multiple times a year to make sure none of this stuff gets out of range. And if it does get out of range, you're going to need to manage that. And you're going to have to deal with it because your long-term health is like on the line when you start playing with cardiovascular biomarkers. So skin and hair, this is another thing a lot of guys don't like. Stimulates the sebaceous glands and may cause acne. Obviously, that's not cool. Just like teenagers, when they go through puberty and their testosterone goes up, their skin gets super oily, and a lot of them get acne. So a lot of guys have the same problem on TRT. You go through basically puberty again, and you end up with fucking acne. Now, again, it varies from person to person, but that is a possibility. What can you do about acne? You can manage it with things like rubbing alcohol, just isopropyl alcohol on the skin. If it's very mild, because acne is caused by oil getting into those, clogging your pores, and then little bacterial infections form underneath of that, and it just kind of perpetuates itself from there. So keeping the area clean with something that's sterile, like alcohol, can help if it's minor. You don't want to like cover your whole body in alcohol, obviously. If it gets super out of control, they can run a cycle of antibiotics that will usually kill it. Now, antibiotics, I don't know. I don't like them personally. I'll take them if I have a bacterial infection, obviously. But I have found, and I have had some bad experiences with them. They wipe out your microbiome. I think it takes your body a very long time to recover from a cycle of antibiotics, and I think it makes you much more, much more likely to get other types of infections after an antibiotic cycle because your body's natural balance of bacteria is disrupted, and so of good bacteria is disrupted, and that leaves you very open and subject to many different types of infections that can be gnarly. So I like to try to avoid them if at all possible. I couldn't imagine a reality where I would take antibiotics over fucking skin acne unless it was just absolutely fucking horrible. But that's just me. I pretty much, if it's not something that can kill me, I don't want antibiotics for it. So it can accelerate male pattern baldness. This is DHT moderated, just like testosterone through the aromatase enzyme can convert into estrogen. Part of it's going to convert into dihydrotestosterone, which doesn't have an effect on the muscle cells specifically, but it is a much more potent, powerful version of testosterone, and it's the androgenic side of testosterone. So it leads to, androgenic means masculinizing. So it leads to the deeper voice, leads to the increased growth of body hair, and it can lead to male pattern baldness. So number 5 here, aromatization and conversion. We've gone over this a little bit, but I'm going to break it down completely. So again, testosterone is converted by aromatase, the enzyme aromatase, into estradiol, or what we call E2. Now, E2 is essential for bone health, mood, and libido when it's at within normal ranges, or maybe even a little bit outside of it. Like some guys do really well with their E2 a little bit higher. Their joints are a little more lubricated. Their mood's a little better. And honestly, their libido's often better. Now, but if it gets too high, it can have all the reverse effects there, and you'll be crying to fucking commercials, and it's just bad news. So it can also convert into DHT, or dihydrotestosterone, via the 5-alpha reductase enzyme. So it's another enzyme in your body. So again, DHT is highly androgenic, and it binds with the androgenic receptors with a greater affinity, but it doesn't have an effect on muscle growth per se. It has an effect on androgenic effects on the body. And this can also, now DHT levels that are too high can drive prostate growth, hair loss, and can arguably lead to some mood issues, just because it's so androgenic in nature. So number 6, suppression of the HPGA and the risks associated. So obviously, number 1, the main risk with TRT is, because it's been pretty well studied, up to 600 milligrams for 24 months. And I will try to remember to link that study in here. But if you just go to like Google or ChatGPT and type in that out, testosterone 600 milligram studies, they studied it at a dose of 600 milligram. Now, TRT doses are somewhere between like 100 milligrams and maybe 200 milligrams a week, maybe a little bit higher than that, but really very rarely does it go above 200 mgs a week. So much lower than this 600 number. And the 600 for 24 months there was virtually no side effects on the statistic majority of the group. So it's very safe. It's very safe with long-term, even at relatively high doses. So TRT doses are overall pretty safe. Now, with that being said, the main risk is going to be it's 100% going to kill your fertility, virtually. I mean, it's not impossible to get a woman pregnant when you're on TRT, but it is much less likely. And in fact, female birth control is basically, I mean, it's not basically, it is hormone replacement for women. They replace either progesterone or they replace estrogen, and that shuts down their HPGA, so they can't make babies. And theirs is more effective than ours, but this does basically the same thing to men. So it's like masculine birth control. So if you are trying to have kids and you're a younger guy, or even if you're not a younger guy and you're trying to have kids, then I mean, it's unless I don't know, you're gonna have to figure that out. There are some mitigating factors. They can use HCG. They can give you FSH directly. There's some things they can do to kind of keep your testicles alive and producing sperm, but yeah, it's kind of a problem, man. So that's the main thing. So it's gonna suppress spermatogenesis temporarily or permanently, even. Like if you're on testosterone long enough. Now most studies indicate that with a good regimen of PCT, so post cycle therapy is what they call it, that'll use something like HCG at a very high dose over the course of a couple of months, it has been shown to pretty much 100% of the time, even from guys that were like basically 100% suppressed, bring back natural production to about what it was before you started. So can you bring your production back? Yes. Is it going to be a bit of a process, and is it going to be expensive? Those fertility chemicals are much more expensive than fucking testosterone is. So that's something to bear in mind. If that's not a concern, then, there's that. But yes, it is going to shut you down at least temporarily, but virtually, I mean, it's kind of permanent unless you're willing to do a PCT and come all the way off. Which a lot of guys don't want to do because they get on TRT and they've had low testosterone for fucking so many years. They felt like shit. They get on TRT, their libido's back, they feel good. The last fucking thing in the world they want to do is come off of it. So you got to kind of factor that in. So it's also going to lead to testicular atrophy. Your balls are going to shrink about 30%. This is going to be due to the lack of LH stimulation and the lack of your body's own production in your testes of testosterone. So, and basically that is what it sounds like. It's just your balls are going to shrink, that's a real thing. And, it's not really a huge deal, and you can kind of mitigate that with HCG if you really want to, but ultimately that really like that plays on the masculine side of things. Like guys don't like that because it just, their balls are like little fucking peas in a sack. But yeah, it will do that. That's a real thing. So that's something that again can be mitigated with HCG if you want, and you don't have a bad response to HCG, but it's something that you're going to have to think of. So again, we went over the hematocrit earlier. That is probably one of that's one of the risks you really need to watch, because that's one that can kill you, and it's one that can kill you with not a lot of warning, because if you get a blood clot and it travels to the wrong part of your body, it can be like instantaneous death. So don't fuck around with your hematocrit. Make sure it stays in range. Don't wait till it's too late. And watch it, because it's going to vary from person to person. If you're on TRT, you need to be getting blood work quarterly, 4 times a year, no less. And by a real fucking doctor, and having a real doctor go over it, not just like some clinic, you're not just some testosterone clinic that wants to keep you on it, like your GP. Like you need to have a conversation with your GP, even if you're not getting your testosterone through your GP, that, hey, I'm on TRT and I want you to keep a look on my blood work and make this as safe as possible. They're probably not going to like it, but if they're a good doctor, they will help you with it, and they will guide you through it, and they will minimize the risk to damage. That's their job. That's the oath they took. And if they're a good doctor, they'll do it whether they like what you're doing or not. So I've always found that being honest with your doctor, finding a good doctor and being honest with them is the key. Like it is, because, they have knowledge and they can help you. And if they're unwilling to help you, then go find a better doctor, because they should be willing to help you even if you're doing something that they don't like. They're not there to fucking tell you what to do, really. They're there to give you advice, and then you're going to tell them what you're going to fucking do, and they're there to try to help you do that as safely as possible. So another thing you're going to see is a lipid profile shift. So you're possibly going to see a reduction in your good cholesterol HDL, and then you're going to see an increase in LDL. This varies from person to person how severe this is, but it's something that you need to watch. Some people have zero fucking changes in their lipid profile on TRT. Others get slammed, so in high cholesterol, I know there's a lot of propaganda going around, and it's not even really propaganda. There is a lot of question as to what leads to heart disease. Is it cholesterol, bad cholesterol, that creates plaque that builds up in the arteries, but that plaque, that cholesterol, can't stick to the arteries unless the arteries are inflamed, which usually comes from eating highly processed foods, refined foods, possibly seed oils, definitely refined carbs. things of that nature. Definitely trans fats. It's going to cause a lot of internal inflammation. But you can check your C proteins in your blood work too, and see how inflamed you are, and see how you're at a higher risk if you're inflamed for high cholesterol. You're building plaque and you're closing your arteries, and it's not a good thing. But so you need to keep an eye on your lipid profile, and ideally you want to keep everything in range. I wouldn't be willing to bet my health on that whole hypothesis that inflammation leads to heart disease and not cholesterol, right? Because cholesterol has been proven, like in myriad studies, to lead to heart disease and an increased likelihood of death. So we don't want that. We don't want you to die. So watch your cholesterol, and that can usually be mitigated with a good diet. Honestly, it shouldn't be that big of a problem. Now, gynecomastia. This is bitch tits. This is where the breasts. So all men start as women, as an embryo, right? And then your daddy's sperm comes in there, and it's got both an X and a Y chromosome, and it shares one or the other. So then you get an XY or you get a double X, and that determines whether you're a boy or a girl, but you have all the same plumbing to be either, right? We're androgynous when we start out. And so you've got the tissues, and you've got the places for estrogen to attach in your breast tissue, right? And to start growing female breast tissue. So that's what gynecomastia is. And it's hard to get the saggy pointed nipples. It's not cool. So usually when gynecomastia will start as some sensitivity in your nipples, a little tenderness, like your nipple rubbing against your shirt, like when your girlfriend's got her period and her nipples are super sensitive. That's you shouldn't get that as a dude. You shouldn't feel your nipples. Like, it's not normal. So if that's happening when you're on TRT, then you're probably aromatizing a lot into estradiol, and you're probably, that's the first stage of gynecomastia. Same with if they start to swell up, those big swollen nipples, you get a lot of water retention. But so gyno, it's something that you need to be aware of. And if your nipples start feeling weird, now it's very easily mitigated with AI. So aromatase inhibitor. So that will bind up all that estradiol, if that'll bind up all the estradiol floating around in your blood, and that will prevent further conversion. Now the thing is, a lot of like clinics will just have you take AI like as prophylaxis, so like just 2 times a week, at whatever doses. And a lot of guys don't need that, because people aromatize at different rates and different levels. And if you don't need the aroma, the AI, then, and you're not aromatizing a bunch into E2, and you're not having side effects from it, then crashing your E2, again, E2 is good. It's neuroprotective. It's good. It protects your joints. You don't want to just crash it universally, because you're going to start getting joint issues, and it can lead to some issues in your brain down the road. So I always say take those with side effects. If you have side effects, pop a half of an AI. It's like it fixes it immediately. If your nipples are stinging, you pop a half an AI, and it's like it's gone, or a whole AI, and it's gone, like in fucking 3 hours. So yeah, just like that's always what I recommend to dudes is you don't have to take those all the fucking time. You just take them when you have side effects, when your nipples start getting stingy, and when weird shit starts happening. Another risk, sleep apnea, again, acne, mood swings. You're not going to usually see any of this at TRT type doses, but I guess you can kind of still be aware of that. So, and we already went over the all the mitigation strategies. So, but number one, and I'm going to close on this: routine fucking blood work. Get your hormone panels, get your CMP, your comprehensive metabolic panel, your lipid panel, and get it 4 times a year, and get it by a real doctor and checked out by a real doctor. Because if this is like your last resort and you're going to go on TRT, cool, that's your choice. It's your body. Do what you do. There are side effects, there are risks, there are problems with it, but they are usually, you're able to mitigate them with the proper protocols, right? So it's usually not a big deal, but just be aware of them. And the best way that you can be aware of them and stay ahead of them, do your fucking blood work. Do your fucking blood work. I'll close on that. If you guys have any questions, I love studying this kind of shit. I love hormones. It's fucking fascinating how the body works. So if you guys have any questions for me, reach out to me on Instagram at thebeastwithin9, and just say, hey man, I listened to your podcast. I got this and this and this question, and I will see what I can do to help you. If you're struggling with your training journey or your nutrition journey, reach out. Let's have a conversation. Let's see what we can do to help you get where you're trying to be. All right, y'all. Warwolf out.